I think we can do that now. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what money is, but I'm going to invite, I guess, and ask the question to all of us here, just to get a take of what our understanding of what money is as it is today in this present forum. So, Robert Gilbert, I'm not picking on you, but I will go through to everybody. Are you passing, or can I start with yourself? What is money to you?
Is it open to all of us, the question?
Absolutely. We're going to go around and ask everyone.
All right.
And so each person just has to contribute what their thoughts, opinions are, and what money means to them.
All right. Since I have the microphone, maybe I could start.
Please, thank you.
To me, money is something that we use in exchange for goods and services, and also for settling our debts in a legal procedure.
Thank you for sharing. Brother King?
Hello, Yannick. This is Barbara. So for me, money is an enabler. It's a means to an end. It enables me to purchase goods, services, tangible and intangible things.
Thank you very much, Sister Barbara. That's a useful contribution. I will come back to that. Any others? I'm trying to get to the other screen so I can see some names because I cannot see them.
Okay, let me just help to call out. Hello, Brother King, are you there? Okay, let's why he's trying now. Let's see.
Yes, yes, okay. I am here. My name is Kobe. This is just I put this as a alias here, right? That's what appeared on the screen when I was signing in. So that's right there. So my name is Kobe, and the sister here spoke very well. And she said that money is an enabler, and it is also whether it's to purchase or not, it is to also invest. It is for investment. That is what his money is for, to me, to invest.
Thank you very much, Brother King. Brothers are here.
Hello, hello. Right, good evening.
Yes. Good evening.
Good evening, Brother Sahi. You just joining. Maybe you missed the question. Yannick just asked us to give our understanding of what we understand to be money. So, coincidentally, it's your turn to give what you think.
What money is, I think, very simple. I would say money is really just a commodity used for us to barter. It's an entity that exists supposed to be to standardize, a certain currency or value and use it to barter. But of course, that has been that entire philosophy has been raped, and now we have cryptocurrencies and stuff. So that's it. That's what I think it is. Just an entity used to trade.
Awesome. I think that there hasn't really been a right or a wrong answer. All of those things, to me, reflect what I have known money to be. What in terms of investment broking, the differences in stockbroking is these two sectors, M1 and M2, that I've highlighted there. And M1 starts to look at, as it says, coins. Thank you, Sister Maureen, for joining us with the coins today. Checkable deposits, we'll come to that. Travelers' checks, you get a lot of these in travel agents. And a crossover between that and M2, which is savings deposits, money markets, investments, stock markets, foreign exchange, certificates of deposits. Now that's a very important aspect of money, especially if you're an African, because most of the raw materials, Congo, Cameroon, South Africa, are still owned by a lot of organizations under the Commonwealth, under what is known as certificates of deposits. So if you look at things like the FTSE 100, you will see a number of companies in the mining sector. Some of these companies are listed in South Africa, all over the world, the Dow Jones, the Hang Seng, China, etc., etc. And a lot of the time, these are covenants, long-term covenants that gives them rights to resources. That's probably the most valuable piece of money on there. That actually reflects money because they own the land or the right to use land. And these are geared at 100, 1,000 years per time. And so for some of those contracts, we're still in that framework. So there is the money that I guess we trade on a daily basis that you and I know that we use. And then there is the money that the corporate West use and have been using for some time. I'm just gonna take you through to.
Can I say something?
Yes, of course, please.
Yeah, because I was waiting on my turn, but then you skipped that.
Cool.
My name is Odell Wickham.
Good evening, Dr. Odell.
And I am in Belgium here. And I'm glad to be here, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to say something about the money. I will say money is a bill of exchange, and it's just a paper we give a value to, and the value could be like a value of one kilowatt hour is like 15 cents, or some places 50 cents, or like a value of an object, or like a little bit, a tiny piece of a little bit gold could be also a value. So you have a value, a bill of exchange, and when you have that on the bank, that paper will worth something. If you don't have the value to back the paper up, then it has no value. It is just a religion you believe in, that it worth that. So that is my opinion about money. What I think money is just a religion now, because the money that's circulating is not, there is nothing backing that amount of currency. I think.
Absolutely, Brother Odell. And please excuse my manners for not coming back to you.
No.
I will come to everybody and give the opportunity, but also please feel free to come in at any point in time. It's an open roundtable discussion, and so that's what we do when we have these. And it fits in with, I guess, what we're discussing and what we're presenting in terms of what money means and what it is, and just the various different dynamic ways in which money is involved in people's lives, how it applies, how you can't really escape from it too, but how at the same time itself it's a piece of paper. And that piece of paper carries its value based on something else underneath or outside of that piece of paper. And I guess it's trying to focus a little bit more as in, well, where does the value actually come from then with regards to money? Because a piece of paper, it's a piece of paper that grows on a tree. It's like any kind of piece of paper. It's been printed nicely and it's been protected so you can't reproduce it, but it's still just in its own a piece of paper like any other piece of paper. That's putting it, I guess, in a very simple, simplistic way. But in terms of finances, in terms of investments, in terms of trading, in terms of, let's say, Bitcoin, which is quite popular at the moment. And there's a lot said with regards to it having a value. There's a value intrinsically built into it, but it doesn't actually have a monetary value. And in terms of subtracting and liquidity, in terms of moving it from one place to another, it's very, very illiquid asset, i.e. the certificates of deposits that I was referring to before are actually ownership to land. So you can't shift land, but the land has resources, and those resources within the context of the land actually become valuable, i.e. gold or whatever else you can produce out of that land, oil, etc. So again, this goes into a little bit more detail. Mindful of time, I just wanted to introduce this idea behind various elements, various aspects of money, how we use money as individuals, and how the system use money and what they mean by money when they're using it. But more importantly, to draw attention to the American dollar and why China for the last 25, 30 years behind the scenes has been fighting and pushing a kind of a global war to have a currency or a commodity denominated currency. So a lot of the resources in Africa and beyond have been bought by China and Chinese conglomerates, not just in Africa, but in South America too. So because Brazil, Rio Tinto and companies are alike still have presence there. Glencore, which a lot of you may have heard of some of these names because they're quite popular in African soil. And in places that we were taken to be slaves to kind of work the land to produce these raw materials. But coming back to the dollar is the exchange rate for the world. That means everybody has to buy a dollar. It means if you are American, you are earning from the world every time we make that exchange. China kind of has a problem with that, but the rest of the world probably should have a similar problem with it and has been pushing for a commodity-based currency. In that commodity-based currency, one of the things that Libya, famous brother Gaddafi, was actually pushing for was an African Union currency backed by gold. We still have a lot of gold reserves, which would then favor us in terms of parity, trading, and exchange rates. That story has kind of been lost with time as we have moved forward and different political situations have opened. But there is an issue if you're African. For example, if you want to buy something in Europe today, you have to convert a dollar to their currency to be able to buy it. And every time you do that, you're therefore subject to the economic cycle, the M1 and the M2 of what is actually unfolding in America. They're the richest country and they're still earning from you anytime you need to buy something. So it's just to kind of put money in context. Again, in terms of finances and how we have been enslaved by the system, the financial and structural capitalist system, there are trillionaires in the world. And I'm not going to say that. I'm going to just show you a short video, which wasn't actually prepared for this, but I'm going to show it to you because it's quite pertinent to this presentation. This is a platform that we run and a colleague, I think, posted.
The CIA assassinated your first popular leader, Mr. Lumumba, and then installed another dictatorship for the next 30 years. And then Glencore and others now suck out your cobalt without giving you tax income. We don't reflect on that. We say, what's wrong with you? Why don't you govern properly? It's interesting, we heard from the Minister of DRC, what's wrong with your country? Well, we don't even start by saying the King of Belgium created a slave colony for 30 years. The government of Belgium ran the slave colony for another 40 years. The CIA assassinated your first popular leader, Mr. Lumumba, and then installed another dictatorship for the next 30 years. And then Glencore and others now suck out your cobalt without giving you tax income. We don't reflect on that. We say, what's wrong with you? Why don't you govern properly? And so we have a system, but we need a different system. We cannot turn this over to the private sector. We already did about 100 years ago. Not only to the private sector with the U.S. military behind it, with the defense of these property rights in the Minister of Honduras's country, where United Fruit ran the country for a long time. And their attorney was the foreign minister of the United States, Secretary Dulles, and his brother was the head of the CIA and overthrew the next door neighbor, Mr. Arbenz, to make sure that United Fruit could have its property. So we have a system, but we need a different system. And the different system has to be based on principles of human dignity in the Universal Declaration, principles of sovereignty, principles of economic rights, because these are not nice things to do. In 1948, all the government said that food is a right, social protection is a right, not a nice thing, not a pleasant thing, a right. That was 73 years ago. The SDGs are nothing more than our generation's attempt to honor the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I come from a country that not only doesn't care about the world's poor, it doesn't even care about its own poor. 1 in 7 Americans is hungry right now, and they don't care. I mean, the poor people care, but one political party, all it cares about is cutting taxes for the rich and filibustering any solution. So we're in a world that's really tough. The private sector is not going to solve this problem. I'm sorry to say to all of the private sector leaders, behave, pay your taxes, follow the rules. That's what you should do. And what the governments should do is the following. They won't, but they should. First, the G20 should become the G21 by inviting systemically the chairperson of the African Union and the African Union to be the 21st country. The European Union is a member of the G20 as the EU. If you add the AU as the 21st for the G21, you add 1.4 billion people to representation at that crucial event. That will change decisively the discussion, because 1.4 billion people are not at the table for finance right now, and they need to be. So my first recommendation is the G21. I love.
Sorry, please take a note of that figure, 1.4 billion people. We'll come back to it.
The G20. Add one seat, 1.4 billion people with the AU represented. Second, we need an order of magnitude change of development finance. The rich countries just borrowed $17 trillion for COVID. The poor countries, nothing. Because the rich countries can borrow at 0, and the poor countries pay 5 or 10% coupon rates or have no access at all. So the world exposed its grotesque inequality this past year and a half. Rich countries didn't say, we tighten our belts, why don't you? My country spent $7 trillion of emergency funding, not one penny for anybody else, by the way. $7 trillion, it didn't even cross the imagination of the US Congress to include a few crumbs for the rest of the world. But the poor countries cannot borrow. That's what we should have heard from the World Bank. I didn't hear that from the World Bank. I didn't hear real numbers. Real numbers are in trillions right now because the world economy is 100 trillion a year. But we don't talk about real numbers. But my job, all I know in this world is long division. Divide by 100 trillion. and then see whether you're talking about something real or not. By the way, for COVID vaccines, what we really need is for the United States to sit down with China, with Russia, with the European Union and the UK one day around the table and allocate these vaccines rather than hoarding them. That's all it would take. The final thing is we need the UN as the core and central institution of this world, period. Because this is the only way we're going to have a civilized world is a strong UN. And it cannot be that the whole UN budget is less than my neighborhood's budget in New York. The UN core budget this year is $3 billion. New York City's budget is $100 billion. And then we say, why don't things work well? Because the rich are hoarding everything. Final point, rather than our 3 billionaires going in space, well, they could go into space and stay there and leave their money behind. That would be one idea. But another idea is we have 2,775 billionaires on the current list. Their combined net worth, 2,700, is $13.1 trillion. Now, I have it on good authority, you don't need more than $1 billion to be comfortable. But they have an excess of $11 trillion over just the $1 billion. So we should be taxing that and having a civilized world. Thank you.
Jeffrey Sachs.
Let's go back. Right. That in terms of numbers, I would just like to get, I'm going to interlude and I'm going to come back to that specific video and this presentation because I would like to speak to Sister Maureen and invite her now if she can put her camera on. And I'm going to talk a little bit about money and how money actually multiplies in the system. And I'm going to use her as an example. And if there's anyone else that has got the workshop tools, if they can please join me in putting their camera on, and we're just going to go through the activity. Awesome. So I do have my own kind of candle here, which I would ask you to light, Sister Maureen, if you haven't already lit it.
Mine is lit. It's right
Thank
here.
you.
Yeah.
In your mind, I would like you to think of whatever it is you would want for us here today. In general, it doesn't have to be about money, but just anything at all. And then if we can please take the paper money that you have. Okay, and I want you to bring the candle next to it. And I want you to burn the money.
Okay. Okay, this is very risky.
Try and be safe.
Can I put it off or should it burn completely?
It needs to burn completely.
Okay, I'm doing it. Oh my gosh. Oh, Lord, have mercy. Oh, oh, oh.
Have you got the water next to you?
Yes, it's right here.
You can use the water to help you put it out.
Okay. I put it out.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
For sharing. Have you got any of the water left?
Yeah, I still have my glass half full.
I've got some and I'm going to share with you. I'm just going to drink the water. You can drink it.
Okay.
Thank you. Now, I hope we were paying attention to the figures that the gentleman Zach just presented in terms of what 2,775, the richest people in the world, have with regards to money and what is left over. And they own most of the factors of production, land, labor, and capital, those certificates of deposit. And what does that mean? That means when you go to work for your employer, anywhere you work, anytime you make money, anytime anybody makes money, in order for them to make money, one of those people has to be paid first. And so anytime they make £1, one of those people probably made £1 million. And therefore, the idea that we will catch up from an economic perspective itself by working, taking out mortgages, taking out rents, etc., this doesn't really figure. And that is my perspective. Let me hold my hand up to that as an ex-investment broker in London. What I do today, I used to trade for a very long time. I traded equities, which is the FTSE 100. This is medium risk type investments, essentially. But we also traded foreign exchange, and we also traded derivatives. Derivatives is what you know today as Bitcoins. So these things essentially don't carry any value in the system. These are just things that people have made up. If you start to understand when the stock market crashes, whether it's the 1960s, 1939, in the early 1920s, and the reasons why, and until today in the 2000s, and so on and so forth, they are all mechanisms which are deliberately geared to go up and down, because the system internally, the very rich know when to buy and they know when to sell and they know what formulas. And of course, they are buying in bulk. So due to economies of scale, they can buy in large amounts and they can actually price you out the market. And quite often, brokers utilize what they call professional investors, brokers utilize what they call novice investors in the system to make money. So they will artificially inflate the price by selling you information that something is positive. And when you buy in terms of your capital, that's when they sell. And you're following a reverse pattern to what they do in terms of their earning and taking your money off the table. And that pattern keeps repeating itself. And that's just to put money in perspective. And for your sake, Maureen, we will send you your money back. Please, I will get in touch with you to send that to you. However, when we do this presentation, we do it live, and we do take money off you to burn it, to give you an indication of what happens when you're investing within the stock markets. There is no return back to you personally, whether you're an African, whether you become a millionaire or a billionaire, because most of the assets that you have will be tied to debt. And most of your life, you'll be paying back that debt one way or another. So that's not to say there aren't millionaires, and that is bad. That's not where we're coming from. It's just how to get there. It's a very difficult journey to see how you can do it ethically. My reasons for leaving the industry, because I couldn't justify, for me personally, some of the activities and some of the behavior and contributing to some of the things that I was experiencing when I pick up the phone to call home in terms of gunshots in the country, and knowing how financially that is all connected. I guess we have looked at a little bit with regards to money and what money is to us, to you, and perhaps to the system. And I guess what our take on money is and what value now really is. So we're going to kind of move forward the conversation as to, well, money doesn't represent value, which is why Maureen helped us in terms of burning her money today. It isn't. There is an underlying asset, which I think Brother Odell eloquently put before, has to come for money to have its value in the first place. And that value is often not even the land, the factors of production, which is land, labor, capital, and enterprise. That is often you and I, whether as slaves, whether it's willingly in terms of their capitalist working system, or is in any other way. Because in order for us to earn, just to live, maybe to pay rent, to buy bread, to have the basics, they must make a profit. And so long as that mathematics exists, we can't really bypass that in terms of challenging the economic system. And this is not to be mindful of the crime and the reparations or the lack of. I guess investing in the 21st and the 23rd letter of the alphabet starts to pivot us to now starts to look inwardly as to where value comes from. And if you know, I assume we all know the alphabet, but please excuse my assumption if it's incorrect. But we're referring to you. There's a little bit more regarding why we've chosen the 21st. It's in line with the number 7. And this is also in line with trading strategies that we think we can use when we're working with people if it's got to do with investing in the markets. Essentially, if I show you how to do something that can benefit you in terms of you might be able to do it for yourself. But if you figure things out for yourself in the first place, absent of my help, because we all have that ability, you can produce for yourself absent of anybody else. And we're looking at, I guess, an inner sovereign self when we're talking about development from the 21st letter in terms of an I consciousness environment, which is, let's say, BME Volunteers as an organization doing the work it does, to a we consciousness environment in terms of what the value is and producing value. So combining those two, we start to see what may look like development and combining that in several different things. So it's a different kind of way of looking at numbers and mathematics. I'm just gonna kind of pause there. Talked about a few things and I am mindful of time, and I'm just going to open the mic for any questions whatsoever regarding finance, investing, money supply, some things that we have talked about, maybe other things that I haven't mentioned, and any questions that you may have. Thank you for your time. So we can, I guess, one of the suggestions I had earlier on was to go around and speak individually and give people an opportunity. And this time I'm going to start the other way around and begin with Brother Zahir. Your thoughts, any questions, any feedback you may have with regards to the presentation so far?
Yeah, I don't know. I may have missed it. Thank you very much for the presentation. But I may have missed it. What was the primary intent on burning the cash? I saw Brother Avi also burning some paper money there, and maybe I was just a little bit lost. I didn't know what to take out of that one.
I think the impact. So we're doing this digitally and electronically. So some of that is lost in translation. What we normally do is we do this live. So if I'd actually taken any kind of currency money from you, from your hand and burnt it, if you speak with Sister Maureen at the moment, she'll probably tell you that was a different experience for her. Most people haven't done that ever in their life. But when you're actually investing, that's what you're doing. Every day you wake up when you go to work, you have to contribute to the system first and foremost because the whole system is geared towards that. So that's what you're doing with yourself, and that's what you're doing with your time. So we just want to emphasize that with regards to trading. So when we're looking at somebody saying, well, I want to invest, we say, well, consider the risk. And until you know what loss feels like, having your own money burn in front of your hands, you're probably not ready for investment for the next level of conversation. So when we start talking to people about investments, we carry out this activity to understand where they are, and it starts to tell us a little bit more about your risk profile. So the next step for myself and Brother Avi would be to have a deeper conversation with regards to what that was like for him in terms of going through that. And to put this in a different context, different people cross the road differently. Some people would cross at the traffic lights. Some people will wait for the lights to turn green. Some people would cross at orange if there's not a car coming. But that all kind of tells you people's predisposition towards risk. Does that help to address your question, Brother Zaid?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. No, I see where you're coming from. Thanks.
So, Brother Sifa, what are your thoughts? Do you have any questions? I don't know if you can hear me. Okay, we can always come back. Brother Ogunzewi.
It's Ongeziwe, police.
Please, thank you for correcting me. Ogenziwe.
Ongeziwe.
Ongeziwe.
I'm late on the meeting, but I think you've covered the question that I was going to ask. So for now, I don't have a question so far.
Awesome. I'm glad I've been able to do that.
Oh.
Sister Barbara.
Thank you, Yannick. For me, it's just to get a deeper understanding from your explanation that every time we transact US dollar, how is that?
So, sorry, I think I'm unable to hear you.
Okay, so yeah, my network is pretty bad. Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better, thank you.
Okay, fine. I was asking about the element where you explained that every time we transact the US dollar, we are also making money for America. How does that happen?
Well, you have to buy American dollar to convert it into any other currency because America is the base currency. So you can't just buy euros directly. You need a common denominator to which to measure what the value of that currency is on that specific day at that point in time. And that is subject to foreign exchange rate. So the total net output and input of the country at that point in time. That's usually down to what the stock markets and the equity and the finance markets are doing. So when you go to exchange money, whether you're sending money to Africa, you're sending money out of Africa, or within Africa, you're given an exchange rate, and that sometimes changes from one day to another. That's because of what is unfolding net for America. So you have to go to the Federal Reserve, first and foremost. They don't explain this, but this is what really happens in the system. If you want to exchange, if you want to buy €1, for example, and you're, say, for example, in South Africa and you're using a rand, you first have to buy $1 in the system. When the system won't tell you that, when you buy that dollar in the system, you're buying it from America because Americans own dollars. Does that make sense so far?
Yes, it does.
Okay, and as you buy it from America, the Federal Reserve will earn, or American corporate America will earn out of that before the other currency, i.e. the euro that you're actually looking to buy, gets converted based on what its value is in comparison to the dollar at that point in time to rand for it to then give you how much you need to pay for somebody to receive €1 in Europe and vice versa. But it's done technically by a system, so it's instant. but America earns at every single transaction at every single point in time. And whilst that happens, it's kind of like the freehold. They kind of have the freehold rights to currency. Trade currency based on what they decide the value of their currency is by setting their exchange rates whenever they set them. It gets very, very technical and very, very complicated. And to have those conversations, I think, usually requires one-to-one tuition alongside a group conversation. So if you're happy to, I'm always happy to have that conversation further with you, Sister Bar, or anybody else. Brother Cabello?
Yes. I'm still putting the thoughts together because I just came towards the end of the meeting. Therefore, I really lost much. Yeah, I was working last night. I had to sleep first, and I missed the time.
No problem. We have basically talked, to give you a quick catch up with regards to money supply, its various uses. I guess our take on this presentation today is based around what is value in money itself and what is value in investments, and distinguishing and separating the two and trying to move away with value as opposed to what money represents, which may or may not represent value in some circumstances. I don't know if anybody else has got anything they would wish to add, please feel free to do so. If not, I'm mindful of time. I will move on to the next section. And
I have something to say.
Oh, absolutely. Please go ahead, Brother Odell.
Yeah, about a decade ago when a dozen years ago when I graduated from university, I had a good friend of mine who also graduated around the same time. He was an economist. He's a real smart guy. And we were talking about, I was interested about economics because I didn't understand much about it back those days. And about money, I didn't understand that. I was only pure technical. But I asked him a simple question. Why is the value of developing countries also low? The value of the money, why euro is so high and the dollar is high? And he could not give me a straight answer. He's first saying yes, it is because of the efficiency of the local country and about blah blah blah. He was beating around the bush, but you break it down very, very good. You're the first person I ever heard who really pointed out what's really money all about. And I'm glad to hear this, how you break it down. What the exchange rate is. So every time you want to exchange with another country, another currency, you need the US as a middleman. Mm-hmm. With every transaction, that is mind blowing. I still have to process that. I'm still shocked what you're saying. What the hell is going on, man? And added to that, the question is then to you, maybe you could answer that, is it not possible to have like bilateral agreements between countries for exchange rate, especially if Africa will be like one trade block, like one trade union or trade space? Maybe they could have bilateral just agreements, or maybe Africa with Asian countries without the middleman, without US. Is that not possible? It could should.
You know something? If you would have asked me that question, maybe 6-7 years ago, where I was still on the trading floor in London trading, I probably would have answered you slightly differently. And I would have said something along the lines of, yes, there are possibilities, so many, for so many different trade negotiations, contracts that we could have in place. But I think at that point in time, I was fairly naive in many different ways. I was more spiritually naive. I'm still spiritually naive today, but slightly less so. And I was less aware with regards to history, financial history, which plays a key part in this, because even if you look back, I mean, we're going back, let's go back a little bit, take us a very short walk in history, Brother Odell, at the Philistine period, when they say they entered Egypt and took over. There is something that came out of that, which is known as the BACT Treaty, B-A-8-E. And in that BACT Treaty, we are, at that point in time, by law, by rights, required to give, I believe it's 360 slaves per day, for every single day. Yes, it's 360. It was 360 days at that point in time. 360 slaves per year to the system, to that PIXA system at the time. And that was to facilitate or to continue the aid and facilitate that system. So this history of trying to negotiate was difficult at a time where we probably, in comparison, were more powerful in terms of financially, in terms of our competitive edge, and probably therefore had more say. So I think at the moment, we don't have any weapons. And from what I see, there isn't an incentive whatsoever for change, and there probably has never been. Repeatedly, at the various different parts of history that I see, some of your work that I see on the platform, it's a repeated cycle of, we're kind of going to do what we're going to do. If it works out for you, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That's the best you're going to get. And I think we just need to do us. Very, very inwardly do us in every single way possible. And whilst we don't have the material and physical weapons and the nuclear weapons, I think we've got things that are far more powerful than that, which we don't yet access and utilize. And that's part of the real value of who we are. I don't know if that helps to kind of put a little bit more flesh in terms of our thinking and a bit more about our work and myself. And if anybody wants to come in there, some of the figures given in that presentation about 1.4 billion people in Africa that have not been represented, all of these things almost go amiss. There is so much crime, financial, racial, and there is the crime of poverty itself, which I think affects everybody, that takes place and has been taking place, which everything is just normal now. So this makes no difference whether I think you are in Cameroon or you're in London, because if you're an immigrant in the UK today, the circumstances that you live in are probably closer to slavery than you have probably ever known. Why you're here, that's another question altogether. So, but whilst you are here, you are still treated in that way, and that is consistent with a lot of the diaspora countries when you really start to hear and speak with the people. So there is a mechanism here that's in place, that is consistent, that is repetitive, that I think is their system. And I think it's beyond racism, because it's plugged into a God and their God. And so therefore, we have to be realistic as to what that is, and whether or not we can challenge some of these things by turning up on work and working and fighting for financial parity every day. Because we have been doing so from then till today, and we are still doing it.
So, Brother Yannick, I have a question.
Please fire away.
I've just been looking at your website and I see you guys are very focused on the inner person. And I was wondering, I once saw this acronym for money where the person referred it to or said it as my own natural energy yield. So I feel that to be very true. And I think that's what you guys are like looking to cultivate in us. Is that right?
And sharing, because I think it's already been, we're very careful not to say cultivate things in anyone, ourselves or others, but where we align, I think that tends to speak for itself. We're here today, there is an alignment in our thinking and beyond, and we look to find people that we have those synergies and alignment with, where we can work together in that common way, in the way as you have just described too. So yes, I think we join, it's almost a different levels of awakening, isn't it? We're joining the family, so to speak. The family has always existed. We're the one that is waking up to it as opposed to anything else.
Okay, I see that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a little question about is it how could it be that that the entire world, what you mentioned, just go along with that, just have the US as base currency? Okay, I understand that that the poor countries will have that, but what about Russia and China? What about India? Do they go along, be bullied by the US to every transaction to be in US deposit? I just figure out hard to believe that. I mean, is it even possible that the entire world?
Well, history would suggest so. So if you look at some of what is written out of what is known as the Jewish Holocaust in the 1940s, you get what they write as coercive control. A lot of psychologists in their system talk about this today. How people, COVID, I mean, there's a number of different ways in which this is being displayed now. There are some professionals that have gone to school all their lives and read science as good as anybody else, and do they subscribe to this? Do they not subscribe to this because they're publicly promoting it? Even Mr. Sachs, it was a bit subliminal. I was wary of that in terms of even having that here within this presentation, because of what he mentions about COVID in that. So on the one hand, it seems as if he's speaking up for Africans. On the other hand, he drops that in there. I'm thinking, okay, I'm not so sure anymore. So there's a lot of work, I think. It's about understanding. We always have to go back to that, where value really lies. And that's the real way that each individual really can invest and should invest. And investing in you will produce the best outcome with regards to, you will start to see the value of the resources, whether it's the land around you, whether it's the labor, the sick person next to you, or anything else that's within your vicinity. One of the things that when we talk about slavery and how that applies today to us, even sitting here, to put that in context of work, is every time you go to work, if you really track what your employer has to do, your employer is not there, whether it's the government or a private individual, for you to be inefficient, because the capitalist system in which it is that you're working in doesn't work that way. So they have to be making a profit, and if they're not making a profit, there has to be fraud built into the system. And so therefore, those are all of the things that you're subscribing to. And again, to start to look at history, this system is based on a number of principles which step away from what we are teaching. So if you look at our history, some of the work that Brother Ravi has put together that I've been privileged to see, tells us in terms of the differences between the two. Now, we understand and we know our current Jewish family that looks like Jewish and claim the current ground of Israel quite clearly doesn't belong there. Again, going back to the point earlier, there is a certain level of, even with COVID, what they call cognitive dissonance in terms of their language. So to put this differently, you would see people very avidly be anti-racist, but at the same time be very, very sexist. And vice versa, be very, very sexist, gender discrimination, but at the same time not be aware of their racism. So this exists and it's quite prevalent in all of us, in myself and in others, and I guess there's different ratios of it. But in the other, and when I say the other, anyone that doesn't look like us and is melanated, you do get from our take a high prevalence of that way of thinking. Again, this ties into this part, and I guess in terms of what we try and say about time and the use of time then, as you start to understand yourself and knowing what you do and don't like, and you're able to pick, choose, and refuse more, even your own thought processes as they enter your head and what happens into them, it focuses you more on what is value to you, as opposed to what has been prescribed by value by anyone in this forum or elsewhere, because that's true value. That starts to speak of value and who you are. And in that productivity, we think that's what produces value. And that type of value is actually sustainable, as opposed to the type of production we have today, which, as you can see, as a system, doesn't matter how far back you can go in terms of what they have produced, hasn't been sustainable. It's actually not effective, what that economist was saying, for anybody. There's a very few people that this actually works for. So mathematically, in terms of Western system and their understanding of maths, they're saying we have failed, but they are not saying that publicly. We have some suggestions with regards to a few things that is needed. Whilst I'm not a trader today for private investors who already have a lot of money, I do and have spent some time, because a lot of investors in the last 7 to 10 years, I will tell you, that I have worked with moved from trading foreign exchange equities, which are medium, low risk and high risk type investments within their portfolio. They normally have a spread to spread the risk, buy umbrellas in the winter and ice cream in the summer and sell it to the opposite type thing. So a lot of them moved from that environment, even gold, which is seen as a safe place to be when economies are in turmoil. Going back to that figure, 17 trillion, which Mr. Sachs said before in the clip that I showed, that 17 trillion is actually debt for the country. And that debt means you and I, if you live in that country, because that's how the government raises finances when it's talking about debt. So again, it's poisoning the people and then making them pay for it. So it's not coming out of this 2,775 group that exists. They don't take on any of that cost. It doesn't really concern them, probably doesn't know it exists. But in terms of kind of, well, these are the challenges. What are the solutions? Because we think in terms of the focus groups we've had, when we talk about Mayat and balance, it is very easy to say there's a problem, but what is your solution? And this doesn't necessarily mean it's the solution for all, but this is what we've come up with. So people can criticize, take away and say, well, we will put this there, put that, do this differently. But it's a starting point. It's not the final point is what we're trying to say. And there's 7 steps to it. And this can take us 7 years, or it can take us 7 months, or it can take us 21 months. It really does depend on finding 49, I think we started at 42, but 49 people that share this idea and share the synergy in terms of when they are ready, if they are ready, if they think this is something that will make a difference going forward. And so it's an invitation. What we give back is our time. What we get back is our time in terms of an exchange, because if you don't have anything else, and if you want to step away from using money and material stuff which destroys the world, you're going to have to trade with something else. And so until we get to a position where we can barter, we trade time, and we can trade time electronically, we can trade time from any location, i.e. if you have something you want doing, we share time in doing it. And that's simply what we mean by trading time, and vice versa. So no currency, no money ever actually has to exchange things, because that's actually the real value of things, what you put into it, which is what we're getting at. Land is the resource we find that is most scarce, that they have been buying and looking to take a hold of for as long as we know. So whether you're on African soil, to find land to grow food, crops is becoming less and less. And in terms of private investors, there's one rule that they go by: there's no factory in the world that is producing any more land. And in that case, the value and the price in terms of economics will always go up because of supply and demand and the elasticity and inelasticity of those curves. It would just always increase. So land prices will never go back, because population sizes are increasing, and as population sizes are increasing, there is more demand. As there's more demand for land, for where people can live, essentials, etc., the prices just continue to rise. So as Black people, we do not have the disposable income to match the inflation, which is what I'm describing over the amount of years that it's been rising for, not even on African soil, not globally. What you find is that a lot of chieftaincies has been tapped already, and a lot of this has been offloaded to them, and a lot of the land has covenants for certain things that you can't do into it. So we have a drive to speak with chieftaincies, local, beyond, high commissions, anybody we really can, beg, borrow, short of stealing and short of immoral things, to just ask. And this isn't to buy, to ask. We have a right to it. Looking at our history, including Israel, we have a right to the actual land of Israel itself. But if you look at the conversation taking place in Israel, we are very, very far from being involved in there. Again, like the 1.4 billion, again, like that 21st seat on the United Nations. So land is the primary objective for us that we will focus on as an organization. We also work with organizations that focus in other areas. So this isn't necessarily exclusively so. Reparations is something that we're very close to, but not reparations for the ornaments and ornaments' sake, the spiritual things that need to be returned for reasons I'm sure you share. And then some attempts to apply a different set of mathematics. I've often spoken in sevens. I've probably spoken in sevens and threes. So if you were to listen to this recording again, you would pick up a pattern of sevens and threes. But I stick to that pattern for many different reasons, because they're the numbers that I'm told matter to us in terms of my own understanding. Trading is something that we believe we can get involved in, but you have to be very careful, because again, being conscious means you track all the way through, or you make an effort to track, or if I take this money, what does it mean for anybody else or for the whole? And start figuring out where that goes to. Well, if there's a kid in a farm, a child in a farm, suffering, a slave anywhere, that has to, for that you to make or take that off the table, then you need to be very careful with regards to how you ethically looking at that. However, if we get to a position where we do have some ownership, which we already do, but we're just building on in terms of land and African soil and the diaspora, we can now start looking at how we exchange amongst ourselves, but sell to the other. Now that starts to develop a sovereign relationship with the exchange rate, where we negotiate with the exchange itself and not with the market. Now that's a different relationship altogether. Again, that requires a bit more conversations with regards to how financial markets work, how we see this moving forward, statistically, in terms of how it fits into trading things such like Bitcoin, a derivative that a lot of people are using at the moment, but it is still a derivative, and that has a lifespan, and that lifespan isn't too far away because it's not sustainable. And then from a spiritual perspective, you have to question what it is you're actually doing. And from that perspective, we veer away from it as an organization. Unless, this is not to say it is bad or it is good, it's just that we haven't found a reason yet to suggest that we should be doing that. That doesn't mean that applies to everybody else. We have an initiative because to transition, not just to go back to Africa, but to transition people from the work system itself to a system whereby they are sufficient, they can eat, they can live, they can do the things that they need to do with their time without having to go to work for somebody else. And if they are going to work, that productivity is theirs. One of the most simple things that we can all do, and this is a challenge because it's very simple, is all Africans did nothing for a year. It would drain out all the resources in their system. It would collapse it. So this isn't going to war. This isn't fighting anybody. This is just saying, okay, we're not going to work for any organization for 1 year that has any connection to currency, to America, to this, to that, to the West. And we're going to focus the whole of that time and all of that resources on African soil. That would collapse the West and it would levitate Africa to a level probably never seen before, simply by doing nothing in their system. So we really want to explore that conversation and speak to others here today, after today, and see where that leads. And that's one of the 4 things that we're going to be doing during this period in time. The 5th is to establish, and I guess, research and focus groups. This has already been done in several different ways and be part of others that are already established too. And to have local and regional chapters. So wherever you are, whatever country you are, you can be involved in this. We want to speak to your neighbors on what is happening there in terms of land, in terms of acquisitions. At times, it may mean that we're buying it together, but we're not buying this as an organization to own anything. We just want to farm the natural foods and we want to put shelter there. So i.e., if I am going to Africa, I can go to a community that perhaps maybe I understand a little bit about it, the spirituality, and we have certain synergies, because I think you'll find that from this side and from home, it's becoming more difficult to find. So that is the 6th element with regards to our development plan, our next steps about this. And it kind of gives a number of different commitments on the 7th step that we try and follow and stick to. I am mindful of time. Thank you very much for your attention today. Let me just throw this back out. Any questions that anybody else may have before we finish? Thank you.
Thank you.
A solution, great solution. I think we should boycott the West, but some people will call me radical or maybe conspiracy theorist or crazy guy, but that's an excellent solution. I was advocating that for a while already, so nice to hear that. Glad to hear that.
Thank you, Brother Gilbert. I hope that there's an opportunity for us to develop where you were, where you left off in terms of your advocation, and maybe have other conversations to explore and see where that goes. I do take on board that people have different capacities and commitments, so we're always trying to be mindful of that. But if there's interest today, tomorrow, or the day after, like I said, we're looking for 49 people. We're at 11 at the moment, so we've still got some way to go. And we think 49 people avidly looking for free land globally will make an impact. To give you an example, in Colombo, in Brazil, it took 42 people to escape, to set off what we now call a degree and type of freedom today. So there's a lot that can achieve with that number.
Wow, I was glad to join. So just get in contact or.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Your number. I'm sorry. You said that 49 people. It is per place or just the organization? You need 49 people or 49 people in an area.
We need 49 people globally. It could be in one area, it could be in 10 areas, but just the 49 that share this focus to then go and speak to high commissions, to speak to local chieftaincies, because there's the right way, as we all know, of approaching it. We also have to do our homework, our research, in knowing how to speak with people in certain places. There are tribes, there are indigenous tribes. For example, in Cameroon, we want to speak with the Pygmy tribes there. Now, you don't just enter their quarters without having consulted with the chieftaincy beforehand. Now, how do you consult with the chieftaincy? Because they're not accessible to everybody. So there's work that has to be done. There's people that know this information already. There's people that, for example, have access to land. We have suggestions amongst the group. Some of the work that Zola Bantu is involved in and continues to do is involved in that already. So I think there's so many different synergies that we can explore, and where those conversations develop align along those lines, because I share what Brother Odell said about this with regards to, and our team shares a need for us to have ownership of land, especially land resources, because again, we know that there's no factory literally producing it. And from the land itself is where everything else comes from. So all the other raw materials, the gold, the copper, the zinc, the periodic table essentially comes from there. So unless we start owning some of the land, and not just the land, some of the technology and some of the patents. There's a group called the Thames Group that is putting up solar panels, and these are all Western organizations winning contracts, or Asian organizations winning contracts. And the people that we call governments are part of that system, and that system works in its own accord. So our view is if you try and almost using the tools in that system to challenge that system where you have less of those tools, it's an outcome already made. You will almost never be able to, or it will take you infinity. We just have to say, well, what belongs to us, where and how, and who's willing to give it to us amongst ourselves. And that's just having very direct, plain conversations with chieftains. There is nothing in our history yet that has told us, or our team, that says we can't go to a chief and say, we want to plant here. We also want to give some of this food to sick people on a daily basis. Literally, if we've got fruit, we want to deliver it to people's houses. Do you have any land that we can do that? And we're also mindful. We've done a bit of research up until now into gathering statistics in Ghana, in Cameroon, and in South Africa about the welfare of homeless children. In some of these areas, our organizations are very driven towards children. And so some of what we want to do is have shelter in some of these farmlands. And so if there are homeless children, there is ready-made food, which is healthy and is organic, and there is shelter for them. And that is the future. And that starts to speak of real development, because they start to get some of the education that I think Brother Arby's material lends well to. And looking at the platform, a lot of your material, and that's why I'm here. I'm begging, I'm almost pleading, because we realize how important this is. And I know you do as well, because I see the material that is there. But it doesn't hurt to position it that way, because it's a good ask for the future. And I will beg till today to tomorrow when it comes to children. I have no shame in doing it. I'm very proud to do it. So begging, anyway, beg, like I said, borrow short of stealing. Borrow, I'm very careful about, because you have to get back on what that says. So we're literally just asking people, whether it's your time or if you have access to land. And then when we have the land, we need the expertise. So some of your know-hows with regards to how to cultivate in specific areas. So I attended I think one of the first workshops I attended where one of our brothers was presenting some of the work he's doing in Tanzania. And so when you look at some of that, there's already existing learnings, expertise, and know-how that we can extrapolate from one locale to another. And that's what I think is beautiful about bringing these forums together. And thank you, Zola Bantu, for doing so.
All right, I have my hand.
Yes, Brother Gilbert, sorry.
No worries. I'm just trying to give an excuse for interjecting. All right. Actually, thank you very much for the presentation as it's going on. There are just a lot of questions I want to ask, but I will, for the sake of time, I will ask them some maybe after this meeting and so on. A lot of interesting things going on. It's very exciting to see the presentation, because it arouses a lot of questions, you know, and that one had in mind. And just another question, a little bit specific to this particular presentation. I like the experiment or the exercise that you did initially about, I wanted to comment, but somehow I didn't have opportunity, about the using of the banknotes and money and so on. I haven't burnt it actually myself, but I can imagine, I mean, the feeling, I could imagine it. And but something I'm trying to ask is how legal is it, to burn money to start with?
There is no law that I have seen that says you cannot burn money. It's paper and it's legal tender. Also with that, one of the things I didn't say with regards to money, you can walk into any shop and you can offer them money and they can refuse it. Because even somebody can offer you money for your good and you can refuse it, that you don't accept money, because it doesn't have to be a means of exchange, it's just one, because you may not consider the money valuable.
All right.
Again, there's different things about the law that this workshop doesn't allow time to really explore in terms of ongoing work. Understanding what a legal person and a sovereign person is internationally makes a difference as to if you are challenged, i.e. if you're given a birth certificate. Quite often in this country, you're given what is called a national insurance number and an equivalent in other countries. And what that does is really buys you by the system. The system buys you, and that's what tags you into paying taxes, debt, and so on, and blah, blah, blah. They say they educate you so they can, that's their investment in you, so they can take that back. And that's a contract which you actually entered into in terms of birth certificates and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very, very more detailed and more delicate response if somebody was to say to me, you have burned the Queen's dollar, I'm going to take you to court. I would welcome it.
Okay.
Because I would then allow me to highlight some of the hypocrisies inherently built in their laws, because they would be taking Yannick Nyah tagged to a birth certificate to court, which is a legal entity. But I'm, as you can hear me, a spirit being. You can see me, a spirit being. And therefore, I am beyond the document of a birth certificate or a passport. And so you can challenge that type of a conversation in a very, very specific way internationally, not just here. Again, there are tools that we can use in terms of legal tools to even acquire land and to get some of the land back. But I think they may come a space in time to utilize those things, because if you ask first and foremost and somebody says no and you ask in the right way, at least you've gone about things in the right way.
All right, thank you. Some other question, but I give space to Zola Bantu. Harvey has a question. Harvey, go ahead.
Absolutely, Brother Yannick. I've been listening to you attentively, and that's why I didn't want to intervene. I've been really blessed with the session, and I'm still scratching my head, but you mentioned something important. You said that we can, boycott. I think what you meant was boycott. Boycott all the institutions.
She wants to get in the car. I don't know.
Someone on the background. Okay. You mentioned something about spending an entire year, moving out of the system. That will definitely bring them down. So I think you mean by boycotting all institutions, I think. So how do you think we can plan this? Like, for example, what is a practical way to plan this? Because if you tell about many Africans who work for these systems to leave their workplace, it means you have to provide a solution for them. You talk about land. So it means we have to provide food for them, provide for them what they're going to be missing from the system. So, for example, if we say we're going to launch this 1 year in 10 years' time, how do we prepare then our societies into getting to that point where we can actually boycott the system for 1 year? You have to prepare the food we're going to eat for that particular period and all these things. You get what I'm saying, right?
Absolutely. But Harvey, when there's a war and everything is damaged, things are blown apart, people have to build. And they build from wherever they are with the circumstances of the time. And so, whilst I think in this forum we understand that it's useful to ask that very question that you're asking, with the idea and other suggestions amongst ourselves to come up with what may be relevant for those people, like in this meeting for us. So what we find is that what we decide in terms of maybe relevant for the people we know in amongst ourselves may not necessarily be the same, but there will be synergies. There will be things that will be similar. So we try and work with people and we ask people what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and we try and figure out a way to then say, well, let's move forward, etc. Or we suggest that this is a way that we can move forward in terms of achieving you wanting to be here over this period in time. But first and foremost, I think there's a number of different obstacles that we encounter, as you know, with regards to the system. Both through choice. Some people may not necessarily want to leave the system, and some people may want to leave the system but can't because children, this, health, etc. There are so many different ways that we're all plugged into it. I think you begin by raising awareness. I think, again, the work you're doing, the work that some of the others on the platform I see are doing and elsewhere, it begins to raise awareness. And that work started even before I started having this conversation. And that's why I say this is all part of joining some of what is already taking place, where it is taking place, and asking questions to those that are currently doing it. Maybe there's some learnings there for us as we go along. So whilst it's very difficult to say that for this group, they should do X, for that group, they should do Y, we do have to first and foremost go to people in Ghana, people in Kempo in Ghana, and ask them what works for you, or is there land here that we can work? What is happening with children? You go to Mali, you do the same thing. You go elsewhere, you do the same thing. You go elsewhere, you do the same thing. And in that activity, there's a lot of engagement that you have done, and there's a lot of knowledge that you organically pick up and you learn along the way, and you consolidate and pick, choose, and refuse different things that you had learned before. And I think individually and collectively, if we agree that Africa is where we want to be and this is what we want to achieve, it then becomes a question of how each sets of people then transition. Now, I've given you a very general answer, and I'm always mindful and trying not to do that. So to put that into a little bit more tangible perspectives, we would have to look at, well, what is it you do for a living from an individual perspective? Okay, what does that mean in terms of your time? How do we then transition whereby you're still maintaining a certain standard of living, you can still pay your bills, but maybe we start reducing on what you're spending on food, because now you're spending a little bit more of your time, you're trying to find a little bit more time to farm. So because you're producing your own food and you're a little bit more wary of food, you're not actually buying food, and so therefore do you need to work and spend your time working there? But that's an example conversation which may not lend to all situations. The important thing is to ask and work with people or settings or families as groups and individuals, as opposed to homogenizing and saying one size fits all. There's some tailoring and there's some customizing, and there's a nuance in terms of approaching people as individuals and communities as bodies of people that are also individuals, and finding out from them first and foremost. Again, what they then tell you defines where they are at and what the limitations are, what steps we can suggest and work at together to get them to maybe step 2. So you might work with another community and they're already on step 4, and they're actually looking to, okay, well, we're in America, we actually can move next year, we don't need to wait till 2030, how do we do this? Okay, well, we have some land, or we know somebody in Congo that has some land. When do you want to move? Oh, okay, in order for us to move, we need X, Y, and Z, we need this house, we need blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, do you have any kind of a budget for that? If you do, you don't. If you don't, let's have realistic conversations as to how that is going to make it happen. So again, it's starting small, working with individual, because as soon as one person does it, you then have a model of one person having done it. And what tends to happen is once that one person does it, brothers and sisters will now have to start calling them abroad all of a sudden. And that starts to regurgitate slightly differently as we have seen over the last 2 years where it has taken place. And in that where are you living now? Friends, people that they would normally see you. Are you coming to here? No, no, actually, I live in Amenda now. Okay. When are you coming back? No, I live here now. Okay, can I come and visit? So already you haven't exactly done anything, but just by being there, you now have maybe friends of the other that want to come and visit there. Now you're bringing investments. So if you have products there, artifacts, ornaments, drums, whatever it is your understanding tells you to produce, you can now retail to them. If you've got connections with high commissions, you can now start looking at this on an international basis. Well, we know that the West doesn't produce food. Where does it come from? So you can have a different relationship again with the West. And most importantly, one thing I didn't leave out today was, we talk a lot about the problems of racism. And one of the things I think us we haven't faced is that people lie, and they lie all the time in terms of their system. And so whatever you think is coming from them in terms of food, in terms of literature, in terms of this, if you're not second guessing it and double checking, whatever it is, and I would say everything, literature, science, technology, because once you start to look at it closer, I guarantee you will find that you have a different take on this altogether. And that's very, very consistent with most of us. And that's how we build knowledge and we build awareness. I hope that addresses your point, Brother Ravi.
Very impressive. Thank you.
Somebody else has a comment or question?
Yes, please. Sorry, I can't. I'm trying to see if I can see all the names.
Okay.
Yeah, any questions or any comment? Brothers are here? Oh, no. No, sorry, that's my thing. Okay.
Yeah, I still have, since in the absence of a question right now, why they are thinking, I have a question like this. I'm not quite financially, I'm excited to listen to this financial conversation. Now, having known the history, especially the most recent history that has taken place on the continent with respect to the struggle for some financial, like currency, like continental currency, just for example, like what Gaddafi was trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
So my question comes like this. Is it possible, right? Is it possible that we can still trade without using money at all?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Who produces money? The money that we have. Money is also a product of their system.
Huh? I'm fine. I'll buy something.
Sorry, I had to.
Yeah, Robert Ilbe, I don't know if you heard me.
Yeah. I had to mute somebody. Sorry, I'm listening to you. That you said is possible?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Money is a product of their system. The way their law works is we choose to use it. And by us choosing to use it, we subscribe to it. So you don't have to, like I said, you can exchange anything. It depends on what's valuable to you and me that's doing the exchange and how we agree that contract. Mm-hmm. Money doesn't have to play any part in it whatsoever. I can give you my T-shirt for your chair if we want to make that exchange, if we think it's valuable to each and every one of us.
Okay. There's something we to reflect a lot about. Some ideas, because of time, I will discuss with you after the meeting. Anybody is welcome to ask questions too. I mean, like, I can give you a call after the meeting, so to say.
Absolutely. My number is there. Usually on Wednesdays and Fridays, I am free most of the day and I can speak for a lot longer. But otherwise, I'm part of the group, and then I will post my email as well on here. So I can happy to kind of arrange the time, Brother Gilbert or with anybody else, to kind of develop conversations and speak more and see where we go with that. And I would really enjoy that. And thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you, Yannick, for what. Now I've gathered the picture of what you guys talked about. This is a very exciting. This is very important. I think it's really very exceptional program, an excellent one, because what I'm gathering it is that the ownership of the land, that's the most important thing that, you know, it just caught my my attention and my eye, because that is the most important thing. Because right now, like there's some folks, foreigners, you know, from China, they're buying land like nobody, with nothing in Africa, and there are people who are getting the land for, you know, for nothing. And yet we are here, we can still work out something powerful, because in the future, that land that will be sold to them will work against us, even as a race or as an African. And of which, I'm very, very excited about.
Absolutely, so am I, Brother Cabello. I'll throw something in there. The UK just voted to come out of the EU, so that was Brexit. You may have caught it elsewhere. Now, during the 80s, 1976, the 80s, I studied economics A-level, so please, this is some time ago. I may be rusty, and if anybody can help me with this. They came up with something called the CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, as part of the European Union and the United Nations. And in that, the UK doesn't really produce anything. They don't make anything. They're call themselves a tertiary type economy, and I guess they're a financial capital because a lot of businesses are based here and pay taxes here, and so that gives them that clout in terms of the rest of the world. But they don't make anything. And when I say that, to put this in context, by them moving away from Europe, where they are now part of a group that can buy, that can bulk buy, and therefore achieve economies of scale, which means less per unit in terms of cost, they're now going to be subject to the market, the world market prices. Now, England doesn't, again, produce food. And what has happened in terms of that policy in the 70s was farming in this country, it's heavily subsidized. So, which then affects the prices, because when you farm on African soil, you're farming where farming should happen and elsewhere in the world. When you produce organic food, people know it's organic. However, because they want the UK to be competitive in Europe, they artificially give them money, and so they are allowed to go into the market at less the price of the African farmers, and therefore sell, where in terms of the cost of production is 7, 8, 9 times the price in comparison. So it's a very inefficient system. And because they've come out of Brexit, that's going to be a very big cost for them. So one of the things we know, especially when it comes to the UK, where they're going to buy their food. So they're going to have to formulate contracts with different people all over the world. And this is going to come over the next 10 to 15 years. And I think if you're in farming, especially with organic food, because there's a white elite that wants to tap into that market, you will kind of do well, because as opposed to selling amongst ourselves, so we can exchange amongst ourselves for free, because we know the financial system doesn't really work for a lot of our families. So asking them to buy things, I think, is kind of insensitive to what the financial system really does to them. And so we can't sell to them, but however, to the capitalist system, we can sell to them, and we can therefore sell at a premium. You don't produce it. So that's some of the ways in which we can start to fight back financially, but independently financially.
Yeah. Yes. No. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and added to that,
yeah.
I think
that number you can use it for WhatsApp as well, right?
Yes, I'm on WhatsApp on that number. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, great. Okay. No, thank you.
Thank
you, Zola Bantu. Thank you, Zola Bantu.
I think what Africa also needs is the tools for development. So we don't need the cash. We can actually, if we get awaken, and we really know we have a common problem, a common enemy, a common oppressor all over the continent, then overnight it could happen, or almost overnight, that people stop using US goods and Western goods and stuff. And what you're saying is very interesting, is that when the Brexit leave the European Union, they'll get less subsidies. They'll have to find a way how to manage the cost. True, yeah. Because I know in Netherlands is also a country in Europe. I used to live there. The government heavily subsidize the farmers. Up to 40% is get from the government, and everything is machinery and highly automated. So, and now they want to get rid of the farmers, because the farmers, they want to centralize the farming system more. They want to move it to Ukraine. Yes, and that's why the farmers are protesting in Netherlands, and they're making a lot of violence, like what they have in South Africa. But what I'm saying is that we need the tools to build those machines and agriculture equipment. We can't just do it overnight without what's the plan? What we're gonna, do if we say, okay, we're gonna stop. We need security. We need the land. Sure, we need a place where we could call our own, but that will be taken away because we don't have the tools and we don't have the security systems. That's something where we need to focus on if you want to start on a project like that. Finally, after so many years. So the tools is important. If you know how the system works, I think we are more ahead than our previous generations who try to release themselves from the beast, because they did not know about secret services and about a lot of secrets, a lot of secrets. What's going on behind the scenes, beyond politics, and just a big capital world. So. Yeah, tools is how we should think. If I was somebody in the government, in some government in Africa, I would really suggest covertly that we just import small equipment, small tools, and that we just need to have the skills to build certain things. And then after we have enough tools, then we can say, okay, we stop the aid, we stop talking with you guys, get out of our land. And then we could build on each other, if we could trade among each other. But there are solutions for it. I really think it can work if we just boycott them and we have brains.
Absolutely, Brother Odell, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Use our brains.
We are the weapon, isn't it? We are the true value. One of the things I was going to say before, they think of themselves as the enterprise element of this system, in terms of the capitalist, or even if it's a socialist system globally. They think of themselves as the enterprise element, and therefore we are the labor. There is the land. Which makes up, obviously, those factors of production. And with them being the enterprise, we will always be the labor, and the labor equates to poverty, which, if you start to look a little bit closely at, it's creates a disease of its own, an absolute disease of its own. One of the things I was going to suggest and say as well, again, in terms of building, in terms of materials, in terms of what we may or may not need, a lot of knowledge, even that knowledge itself, is based on their system. Brother Odell, you may get there and start messing around with ground and discover something or a new way of making a brick within months that hasn't been done before. And I say this, and I have examples, and I do have an uncle who's an architect, studied in Italy, went back in 2003, and just kept on studying mid bricks in the village, and how to build a house using mid bricks so it's water resistant in the rain depth. And therefore you can use the soil that is there, as opposed to, because it's quite hilly terrain. So one of the key issues is getting vehicles, even if it's heavy good vehicles, to that place to build is very difficult. So with that being difficult, how do you use the terrain then to build? So what I'm getting at is, there's so much of us that I think as we start to awaken and as we are awakened too, our take on some of these things will be different. That is part of the workshop. No one ever burns their money and not be refunded for it. It's just to, I think, make the point of what our view is and take is on money. And I think nothing stays in people's mind than burning money itself, because that's usually the first time that they've actually done it. Thank you for today.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, Yannick. It's been so inspirational. And like I said, personally, there are just lots and lots of questions that, yeah, if I will need to start it, we'll definitely go far off the time. So if no other person has any comments, then our meeting
Yeah, I have
is...
a small comment. The last video was very interesting, and I also got my my thoughts and opinions about those structures. You have more structures in South America, like in Peru. You have the line of Nebraska, they call it, and you have the Titicaca River. You have on a mountain. How you call it? I forgot the name. On a very high mountain, you have huge structures. The mountain is about 4 kilometers high. It's called. Wait, I forgot the name in Peru. But anyway, that's a tourist attraction. It also has to do with the ancient civilization that is missing. In various places in the world, you see structures and signs of hidden civilization commonly all over the world. In South America, you see it in Europe, you see it even in Britain. Look at the Buckingham Palace. In the 17th century, Britain could not build things like that. Even now, it's hard to build a structure like that. Or the Vatican, or the Champs-Élysées, in Paris, the Arc de Triomphe. There's also a structure that suggests that it is a hidden civilization was lost not so long ago, maybe a few centuries ago, and it was all over the world. Even in Africa, you see in Timbuktu, where is it? Is it Mali? Yes, you see also similar type of engineering, similar type of structures with the same symbolic symbolism on it, and also in the long list of UNESCO World Heritage has that, and in Zanzibar you have also structures like that. So I like to see more about this, but this is just what I recently discovered that, and this debunks actually the whole evolution theory and the whole mainstream narrative about how we come to this point, that we had previous civilization that were even more advanced.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's that's my point. What I want to make.
Just to add something there, the interesting thing there could be to find out how the transition came from being so advanced to this current civilization. What happened? Why not just continue the advancement? There should be something interesting to find in between the lines.
Yeah, it could be a worldwide cataclysm. So big, let me say, flood or a natural disaster that because you could see certain structures in Peru, they're like if it looked like if it appeared like if they're carved in a mountain, but actually they're not. Actually, it looked like if the mountain itself came over those structures and baked them inside. So they're actually in the mountain. And then it's a very mystery how they get like that. And it could also be a third possibility is combination with that. That is one, but also that a mass suicide or mass how you call it offering. Yes, for like what we have now, like COVID-19, could potentially cause humanity to kill itself. Potentially. I don't think it will go that far, but it could be, because we will have now people who believe in the lie, and people who don't, who want to believe in the truth. and they will be also fighting themselves, while a lot will die from the result of the medicine. So I think that could be a possibility. The three reasons why the civilization did not continue to now, why you had the ups and downs. And I think you might be going back down now, I think.
Correct.
Great question, Brother Gilbert. Good thing. I like your line of thinking, Brother Odell, and it's something that I would like to explore. I'm really looking forward to speaking with you as well, because it's one of those things that is always useful to learn whether somebody else has seen and come across. Some of the ones you mentioned have come across, some I don't know of, so it's a good learning opportunity.
Absolutely.
Great.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Wow, thank you so much, Brother Yannick. It's an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
You too.
Thank you.